The movie is Exit 8, which was written by Kentaro Hirase and Genki Kawamura, and directed by Genki Kawamura. This horror film follows a young man who finds himself inexplicably trapped in an endless looping subway tunnel that's seemingly bound by specific rules that detail how to escape. However simple the instructions for escape may be, following them is far more complex, and our protagonist quickly understands that he must persevere at all costs if he ever wants to make it out alive. This film is the latest indie horror video game turned feature film, and once again, I haven't played the video game. So I can't really speak to the source material and how the film compares to it. But I do know the basic premise of the game, where you're stuck in this endless hallway and you continue to progress and eventually escape by following these very simple rules. If you see an anomaly, turn back immediately, and if you don't see any anomalies, continue forward. In order to escape, you have to do this successfully 8 times in a row, thus the exit 8. And if you break either one of these rules, you start back at square one and have to start all over again. So the filmmakers gave themselves a massive challenge in trying to make a movie out of this game, because it's incredibly repetitive just by its nature. It's pretty much contained to a single location, and there's very few on-screen characters outside of our protagonist. Now, to me, I probably would have said that there's no way you can make an interesting hour-and-a-half long narrative out of something that's this limited. There's just not enough meat on the bones to make a film, in my opinion. But I was dead wrong.
You're wrong.
I couldn't be more surprised. The writers were able to make a film with real substance by creating these amazing character arcs that were powerful and emotional and honestly just very compelling. And so they kind of did it. They made something out of nothing. And fueling these strong character arcs were some rich metaphors and some heavy-handed symbolism, but that ultimately gives the viewer a good bit to chew on after the film ends. What could have easily been a lukewarm, one-for-one remake of a horror video game was instead a beautiful story about this young man's struggle and overall journey of becoming a father. The film follows 3 characters: the lost man, who's our main protagonist in the film, the walking man, and the boy. They each have interesting and different experiences in the tunnel and in their lives from the bits and pieces that they share with us, and similarly, there are a number of different life lessons that you can draw from each of the characters' experiences. The somewhat dreamlike, or probably more nightmarish situation that the lost man finds himself in reflects a lot of the anxieties and doubts that he has about having a child. Also, at first, I was starting to panic because I was like, I think it is just going to be a frame by frame recreation of the video game, because it was a first person POV for the first 5 minutes, and I was freaking out a little bit. Thankfully, it transitions to a much more traditional cinematic third person perspective, and actually, it has some really well choreographed continuous tracking shots that add to that paranoia the protagonist feels as he wanders those isolated hallways. There are some very obvious references to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining in the film, from near recreations of scenes to tons of the same types of shots that made the Overlook Hotel so creepy. And although I don't think that they had as much of an effect in the sterile hallways of the subway, they did still make the film quite interesting visually. I'll also say, I don't think it was really scary. I honestly am on the fence of whether or not you should call it a thriller or a horror. There were definitely some good liminal horror elements that were very creepy and very eerie at times, but there was just nothing that made me feel terror. Like, you should not go into this movie expecting to be scared. That being said, it is extremely anxiety inducing, and not just because of the never ending hallways that seem horrific to be trapped in, but also because the protagonist is asthmatic. And when he's suffering and you hear his gasps and his labored breathing, it actually makes you feel like you're about to have a panic attack. Also, as you might imagine, early on in the first act, the film is quite repetitive. And I'm sure it's intentional, it's reminiscent of what it's like playing a video game where you do the same thing over and over and over again as you're figuring it out, but it can just be a little bit too repetitive to the point that it feels a little bit boring at times. But despite that kind of slower pacing in the beginning, and it is a little bit boring, stick with it, because the second and third acts are so interesting. They give the film such great depth, and really, they're the reason that the film's worth watching at all. Overall, I was surprised by how much I like this movie, especially given that I've never even played the video game that it's based on. And while it wasn't terrifyingly scary, it manages to transform a simple liminal horror game into a beautiful, meaningful story that really stuck with me after the film ended. You can currently catch this one exclusively in movie theaters. So go watch Exit 8. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, really helps me out making these videos, and you can get these videos onto your homepage. Don't you want that? Like the video. That also really helps me out. And leave a comment letting me know what you thought of this movie or what movie you think I should review next. I put out a movie review each week, so subscribe to stay tuned. Thanks, y'all.